The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Martin Luther King Jr. said that. A hopeful thought, definitely. But sometimes when you look closely at things happening right now, well, it feels like parts of that arc are bending incredibly slowly, maybe even the wrong way for some people.
That's a good way to put it. And it ties right into our topic today.
Exactly. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a reality that often sits uneasily alongside stories of, rapid economic growth. We're talking about India's hidden workforce.
Right. We're aiming to pull back the curtain a bit on the toil, the exploitation, and frankly, conditions that strongly suggest forced labor all happening while India pushes to become this major global economic player.
Yeah, it feels crucial to look beyond those big economic numbers, doesn't it? To see the human stories that can get lost in the averages.
Absolutely essential.
And the main source we're digging into for this is a really detailed investigation by Al Jazeera. It's titled, India's Hidden Workforce, Toil and Exploitation.
A very direct title.
It is. And our mission here is to unpack what this article presents, the details, the experiences of the workers it features, and try to connect those dots to the bigger picture. India's economy, labor laws, the real-world challenges of making those laws stick.
Yeah, and this is critical stuff for anyone trying to understand contemporary India. If you're prepping for exams, maybe UPSC, where these issues pop up in mains, prelims.
Or even if you just want to be an informed citizen, really. Understanding this side of the story is, well, it's non-negotiable.
Couldn't agree more.
And we want to be clear, as we go through this, we'll be looking closely at the claims the article makes, the data it uses, the sort of contradictions it seems to highlight. We really encourage you, the listener, to think critically right along with us.
It's easy to just hear the growth narrative, isn't it? But it's vital to ask, what's that growth actually built on, and for whom?
Okay, so where does the article start? It zooms right in on a person, doesn't it?
It does. It introduces us to Ravi Kumar Gupta. He works in a steel factory in Maharashtra's Tarapur industrial area.
And the description is pretty vivid. Feeding scrap metal, molten iron, into this roaring furnace requires precision, adding chemicals, adjusting fuel.
Dangerous work, clearly.
Very. But then there's this contrast the article points out. He's got a safety helmet.
Okay.
But on his feet, worn out slippers.
Slippers near a furnace. That detail just jumps out, doesn't it?
It really does. It speaks volumes about maybe the gap between the job's risks and the actual protection he gets.
And the physical toll is right there, too. After a shift, the article says he's physically spent, bloodshot eyes, clothes stained with grease, sweat.
And the money side is just as grim, according to the source. 4 years there, and his monthly wage is about $175.
Which, the article notes, is actually less than India's average monthly per capita income.
Right, and even that amount isn't guaranteed on time. Paychecks often delayed, maybe the 10th, even the 12th of the next month.
Then there's the layer of the middlemen. These individuals, they supply the labor to the factories, right?
Yeah, and the article says they skim off a portion of Ravi's wages, maybe $11 to $17 from that already low $175.
On top of that, another deduction. $7 a month, mandatory, for canteen food, described as pretty limited.
So low pay, late pay, a cut for the middleman, deductions for food. It paints a picture of, well, extreme pressure.
Exactly. And when the article asks him why he stays, his answer is reported as quite resigned. What else can I do?
His reasons are about survival, aren't they? He sends about $100 home each month.
Yeah, supporting his family, 2 young daughters, his wife and mother on a small farm plot, an ailing father. They depend completely on that money.
And he links it directly to climate change, says it ruined farming.
That connection is powerful. He talks about unpredictable rains, land that can't support them anymore, just no jobs in his village.
The quote is stark. There's nothing left. So like the others, I left. It really highlights that push from rural areas, doesn't it? Environmental and economic collapse driving people into these precarious situations.
Often through these informal channels, these middlemen.
And Ravi's story, as the Al Jazeera article presents it, isn't just about him. It's used as a lens, a way into these wider systemic issues in factory work.
Right. Connecting the personal to the systemic. For example, the Factories Act of 1948.
Which is supposed to protect workers, right? Yeah. Mandates paid annual leave if you've worked over 240 days.
But the article states that for workers like Ravi, any day off is unpaid. Simple as that. Doesn't matter how long you've been there. A clear gap between the law and the reported reality.
And working hours. Sundays are meant to be an official holiday, have been since 1890.
Yet the article reports Ravi and others often work 7 days a week, every single day of the month. No paid rest.
That continuous grind, It's grueling. And another basic thing missing, according to the source, salary slips.
Paid in cash, no record of earnings, deductions, hours. How do you even question your pay without proof?
You can't, really, which feeds into what happens if you're absent.
Yeah, this part is particularly harsh. Miss just 3 or 4 days straight, and your factory entry card gets deactivated.
And when you return, you're treated as a new hire. Lose any eligibility you might have built up for things like Provident Fund, gratuity.
It seems like a way to keep workers in a constant state of insecurity, preventing them from ever qualifying for long-term benefit.
But the kicker, as the article points out, is they often have to rejoin under these terms because the factory owes them back pay.
Right. They can't afford to just walk away and lose those pending wages. It creates this dependency cycle.
And underpinning a lot of this, according to Ravi and his colleagues in the article, is the lack of written contracts.
A fundamental thing. And the article cites a 2025 study, quite recent, from the Indian Journal of Legal Review.
What did that study find?
It directly links this absence of written agreements to, well, exploitation, wage theft, even forced labor conditions. Especially, it notes, for vulnerable groups, migrants, women, low-skilled workers.
So no contract means almost no formal protection.
Precisely. And back to the safety issue working near that furnace, over 50 degrees Celsius.
And the article says no proper safety gear, not even protective eyewear.
Ravi's quote on this is pretty direct. Neither the middlemen nor the employer gives us even the most basic safety gear.
Followed by that line about having no choice. When you're desperate, you have no choice but to adapt.
It really hits home, that sense of desperation.
The article also mentions that Al Jazeera tried to get a comment from the Maharashtra Labor Commissioner about these specific conditions back in May. Received no response. That silence, as reported, kind of hangs there in the piece.
Okay, so that's the steel sector, but the article doesn't stop there, right? It looks at other industries too.
Correct. It shifts focus to shrimp processing. Introduces us to Sumitha Salome. She's 47, working in Kakinada.
And her situation. Similar vulnerability.
Very similar, but maybe even starker in some ways. Her earnings are even lower, around $4.50 a day.
Wow. And hired how?
Again, no formal contract. Hired through a contractor this time, a woman from her own village.
Interesting. And the factory itself?
Exports shrimp, mainly to the U.S.,
Yeah.
employs migrant workers, and it's described as heavily guarded, access tightly controlled.
That security detail is interesting, especially contrasted with the lack of worker security.
Exactly. The article mentions talking to people in the villages where these workers come from. Same story. No contracts, no social security, no health benefits. The gear they get. Gloves, caps for shrimp hygiene, not worker safety.
And Sumitha's description of the work.
Intense. Pay based purely on how much shrimp she peels by weight. Just a 30-minute lunch break. Expected to work through menstrual pain. We just keep working, she says. Paid in cash, no pay slip again.
Yep. Cash, no pay slip, no way to contest pay.
And her personal circumstances sound incredibly tough.
They do. Divorced mother, loans from her elder daughter's marriage, younger daughter in school, plus caring for her elderly mother who needs cancer meds, about $10 a month, which is huge on her income.
So the pressure to keep working, no matter the conditions.
Is immense. Her quote reflects that. I have a job contract or no contract. That's what matters. And that fear. There are no other jobs here. If I start asking questions and get thrown out, what then?
It's that same theme of limited options, feeling trapped.
The article also features a younger worker, Minnu, 23. She's from Odisha, working in a shrimp factory near Krishnapatnam port.
Migrated young.
At 19, poverty, family debt drove her. An agent arranged the job. Her earnings are about $110 a month.
And the article highlights something specific about her situation.
Yes, severe restrictions on her movement. She's apparently only allowed out of the high-security factory once a week for just about 3 hours to buy essentials.
That sounds very controlled.
Extremely. And Minnu is quoted as being aware of the exploitation. We know we're being exploited, she says. Our freedom is restricted. We have no health insurance or proper rights, constantly under surveillance.
But she stays. Why?
Same reason, really. Like many of my coworkers, we don't have other options. We just adjust and keep going. She also mentions unpaid overtime, feeling watched by cameras constantly, like being in an open prison.
An open prison. That's a powerful phrase.
It is. And again, the article notes Al Jazeera reached out for official comment this time to the Andhra Pradesh Labor Department and the Indian Ministry of Labor.
And again, no response reported.
Correct. That pattern of official silence as presented is becoming quite noticeable.
So these individual stories, Ravi, Sumitha, Minnu, the article, uses them to illustrate something broader.
Yes, it explicitly connects them to the ILO, the International Labor Organization's definition of telltale signs of forced labor. It's arguing these aren't just bad jobs, they cross a line.
And it tries to quantify the scale of this.
It does. It cites figures from Benoit Peter at the Center for Migration and Inclusive Development using NSSO data, that's the National Sample Survey Office.
Key government data source.
Right. The figures presented are stark. Total workforce around 470 million. Organized sector, maybe 80 million. That leaves
390 million in the unorganized sector. That's huge. More than the entire U.S. population, as the article points out.
And the ILO's own India Employment Report for 2024 also cited says 90% of India's workforce is informally employed, which usually means fewer protections, fewer benefits.
And within this vast informal workforce, the article asserts many are victims of forced or bonded labor.
Despite India ratifying ILO Convention 29 way back in 1954 to suppress forced labor and abolishing bonded labor by law in 1975, the problem clearly persists, according to the source.
It quotes an estimate from the Walk Free Foundation.
Yes, they estimate 11.05 million people in modern slavery conditions in India, highest absolute number globally, about 8 in every 1,000 people.
And the article itself adds a caveat there, right? Suggesting the real numbers could be even worse.
Exactly. It acknowledges how difficult it is to count a hidden population involved in something illegal. That difficulty in getting precise data is sort of baked into the problem itself.
Then the article brings in the government's own statements and targets, like a former labor minister in 2016 estimating 18.4 million bonded laborers.
And setting that target to release and rehabilitate them by 2030.
This is where the critical angle comes in sharply. Based on the article's structure, it contrasts that huge number and target with what?
With a parliamentary statement from December 2021, which revealed that between 2016 and 2021, 5 years, only about 12,000 were actually rescued and rehabilitated.
12,000. Against an estimated 18.4 million problem and a 2030 deadline. The article essentially highlights this massive gap.
It really raises questions about the pace, the feasibility of meeting that target based on the figures presented.
The article also zooms in on specific sectors, doesn't it? Textiles are mentioned prominently.
Yes, highlighting Tamil Nadu and Gujarat as major exporters, citing parliamentary documents.
And it includes insights from a union leader.
Fivya Rakini, president of the Tamil Nadu Textile and Common Labor Union. She talks about seeing ILO indicators of forced labor intimidation, excessive overtime, withheld wages, even violence in almost all her factory visits over a decade.
And she attributes this to the business model.
Directly. She links it to the pressure from global fashion brands demanding low prices, tight deadlines. That pressure, plus weak worker organization and grievance systems inside factories, creates an environment the article says is ripe for forced labor.
It's a massive industry. 45 million workers mentioned, including handloom.
And a huge percentage, 60–80% in factories, are women.
Who face specific vulnerabilities, according to the source.
Yes. Lack of contracts, even when men might have them, lower pay for the same job, higher risk of violence and harassment, and extra vulnerability if they're Dalit, migrant, or single mothers.
The article also looks beyond factories, into the supply chain.
Right. It mentions an investigation by a group called Transparentum on cotton farms in Madhya Pradesh.
What did they find?
Their report, cited from Jan 2025, based on earlier fieldwork, found child labor, forced labor, and really unsafe conditions like kids handling pesticides without protection. Shows the problem runs deep into agriculture, too.
So what about the policy response? The article touches on the new labor codes, right?
It does. The consolidation of 29 old laws into 4 codes between 2019–2020. The stated goal was simplification, ease of doing business, but also worker welfare.
But the article presents critiques.
Immediately, especially from trade unions. They argue the codes actually favor employers, dilute protections workers had before. So a clash between stated intent and perceived reality again.
Any specific examples given?
The requirement for registering a union used to be just 7 workers. Now it's 10% of the workforce, or 100 workers, whichever is less. A much higher bar.
Making it harder to organize, essentially.
Exactly. Santosh Punya from India Labor Line is quoted saying this weakening of bargaining rights leaves workers with little choice but to tolerate exploitation.
But there's another perspective offered, too, from a lawyer.
Sanjay Ghose, a labor law lawyer. His view, as presented, is that the real issue isn't so much the laws themselves, old or new, but the failure to actually implement them effectively. Enforcement is key.
Which suggests the problem might be less about the rules on paper and more about making them work on the ground.
A crucial distinction, and the article links all this to the wider economy.
How so?
Goes connects it to slow job creation. If good jobs are scarce, workers are less likely to leave bad ones.
He uses the example of IIT graduates, premier engineering schools.
Yeah, pointing out that even their placement rates dropped 10 points since 2021. His implication is, if they're struggling, imagine the pressure on less qualified workers. They might feel forced to accept exploitative conditions because options are so limited.
And another expert weighs in on investment.
Pramod Kumar, formerly with UNDP. He argues, according to the source, that weak private investment and FDI foreign direct investment means growth relies too much on government spending.
And that concentrates jobs where?
Often in the informal sector, where these exploitation issues are most common. The article gives some figures: private investment down slightly from pre-COVID levels, FDI declining in one quarter due to global uncertainty.
So the economic climate itself might be funneling people towards more precarious work.
That's the argument presented. Which brings us back to Santosh Purnia's final point in the article.
Which is?
He basically asks, given all this, the economic context, the implementation challenges, the focus on ease of doing business, how can the government possibly meet that 2030 target of rescuing 18 million bonded laborers?
His outlook isn't optimistic then.
No. He's quoted expecting the situation to worsen, especially if business ease is prioritized over worker rights. It's a critical assessment presented right there in the source material.
Okay, let's bring this together for you, our listener. Why does this deep dive, based on this one article, matter so much?
Well, I think it moves us past just looking at GDP figures or abstract economic trends. It grounds the discussion in the real, lived, often incredibly difficult experiences of the people who make up a huge part of that economy.
And the article strongly suggests these aren't just isolated cases, right? It frames them as systemic issues, woven into supply chains, made worse by economic forces, complicated by policy and enforcement gaps.
Exactly. Pervasive across this enormous unorganized sector.
For anyone preparing for UPSC, this connects directly to so many syllabus topics: economy, labor, social justice, governance, policy effectiveness, you name it. Understanding this critique is vital.
And for everyone else, it's about developing that critical lens, looking beyond headlines, questioning the data, and understanding the complex realities behind the numbers.
So we've walked through Ravi's story in the steel factory, Sumitha and Minnu in shrimp processing.
Connected their experiences to the lack of contracts, unpaid leave, safety issues.
Looked at the sheer scale of the unorganized workforce, the gap between bonded labor targets and reported progress.
Touched on vulnerable sectors like textiles and cotton farming, the debate around labor codes versus enforcement.
And linked it all back to economic factors like job creation and investment, all drawn directly from that Al Jazeera piece.
Which again was titled India's Hidden Workforce, Toil and Exploitation.
It definitely highlights a stark tension, doesn't it, between the aspiration of being a major economy and the reality described for millions within it.
It really does. Which leads to a final thought, maybe something for you to consider, based only on what this article presented. Given the economic pressures, the policy challenges, the sheer scale of this informal sector described here, what could actually break this cycle of desperation and exploitation for so many workers in India?
A huge question, and one worth pondering. If you found this deep dive helpful, if it gave you a clear picture based on the source, please do take a second to like this, subscribe, maybe share it. It helps us keep doing these analyses.
And please leave a comment below. Any questions you still have, any points from the article that particularly struck you, we'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the conversation.